The coronavirus outbreak and the subsequent lockdown have significantly changed our working life. Employees all around the world were forced to work remotely and exchange with their companies and fellow colleagues exclusively via the internet. While this might have been a new experience to many of us, some workers have been regularly working remotely before the pandemic. For online freelancers, like software developers, graphic designers or admin staff, it is in fact normal to work remotely via so-called online labor platforms. This podcast is about how these online platforms are changing the nature of work and how the current COVID-19 pandemic is shaping the process. My name is Dr. Fabian Stephany. I am a postdoctoral MCR member at Jesus College, Oxford, and as an economist and social data scientist, I am working with the iLabour research group at the Oxford Internet Institute. Our group is led by the economic sociologist Professor Willi Ledonvirta, who is a Hugh Prize Fellow at Jesus College, Oxford. The research of the iLabour group focuses on so-called online labour platforms. Over the last years, the internet has changed the way that labour markets work. People are increasingly using the internet to both advertise and find jobs via online job boards such as LinkedIn, for example. Most recently, not only the information about workers and companies, but work itself began to be exchanged via so-called online labour platforms. These platforms match buyers and sellers of short-term work that is digitally delivered anywhere around the world. Tasks like software development or admin support, but essentially every type of work that can be remotely delivered could be exchanged via online labour platforms. The number of online workers who earn some or even all of their income on online labour markets has been rising globally throughout the last years. As the relevance of online labour is not captured in traditional employment statistics, researchers and policymakers are in need of reliable information on how online labour markets are changing the dynamics under which work is done and distributed around the world. Therefore, the iLabour group has developed the so-called Online Labour Index, which is a tool that measures in near real time the utilization of online labour markets. It shows us how much work is done and what kind of skills are being utilized. The Online Labour Index allows policymakers and researchers to identify the scale, speed, and direction of change in different occupations. Since 2016, the Online Labour Index is now measuring the development of online labour markets. We observe a clear trend that online labour markets are growing with regard to both the projects that are being requested globally and likewise the number of workers that are joining the online labour markets. This general trend has several drivers. For example, we see that digital work, such as software development, can be broken down, just like computer code, into smaller subtasks which can then be distributed to several workers around the world via the use of increasingly sophisticated digital technologies. So both the fragmentation and the redistribution of work depend on the internet and digital technologies that allow remote work. Therefore, online freelancers are used to working remotely, maybe even for a client at the other side of the world. Now, as the coronavirus pandemic has forced on-site employees to shift much of their work interactions online too, our research team began to wonder how this shift could impact online labour markets and the livelihood of online workers. In general, two effects are imaginable. On the one hand, as companies switch from on-site contractors to remote freelancers, the demand for online work could grow. This is what we call the distancing effect. On the other hand, as companies are facing declining revenues, they have to reduce non-essential spending, including external contractors, and so the demand for online work might diminish. This we call the downscaling effect. To investigate which of the two effects might dominate, we turn to data from the Online Labour Index. In our recent study called Distancing Bonus or Downscaling Loss, the changing livelihood of US online workers in times of COVID-19, we examined the dynamics of online labour markets in times of the coronavirus. Over the past several years, the online labor index has shown a clear seasonal pattern. Usually, demand drops during the year-end holiday season and then rises again to reach a plateau in February, which normally persists until the end of spring. However, this was clearly not the case in 2020. By mid-March, when the World Health Organization declared that COVID-19 had become a pandemic, the online labor index was in deep decline. We decided to team up with fellow researchers from the United States who had conducted interviews with online freelancers during the pandemic, and together we examined the dynamics of online labor markets with the example of the US and took a closer look at how different occupations reacted to the crisis. Generally, the online labor index categorizes online labor into 6 occupations: clerical and data entry work, professional services, software development and technology work, creative and multimedia jobs, sales and marketing support, and writing and translation work. Interestingly, not all occupations had experienced the effects of the pandemic in the same way. We see that demand in creative and multimedia jobs, as well as in marketing and sales support, shrunk significantly as the pandemic unfolded. But requests for projects in software development and technology remained largely unaffected. We believe that this finding is consistent with an interpretation that companies cut non-essential freelance contracts, such as marketing and sales campaigns, while maintaining freelance outsourcing that is essential for continuing business operations, such as tech support and database management. The occupations that experienced deep cuts are now slowly bouncing back, but the winner occupations like tech jobs are experiencing even more demand than before the crisis. At this stage, we think that this is consistent with the idea that the rapid push towards video conferencing and other remote operations across companies has created additional demand for freelance IT specialists who are now able to help companies. In light of these findings, we began to wonder if the increase in demand for online work in tech jobs might actually attract more workers to join online labor markets in this domain. Via the online labor index, we are able to observe the number of registered worker profiles on a subset of online labor platforms. An increase in the number of registered freelance profiles in the US was indeed evident since the beginning of April. In particular, a very significant number of freelancers have now newly registered in the domain of software development and technology. Other occupations, however, do not show a similar increase in registered workers. We think that this is consistent with the interpretation that recently laid off workers across the economy are not registering en masse on online labor platforms to attempt to make up for lost income. Some workers are probably doing so, but to some extent we think that the increased supply in the domain of software development and tech might also be attributable to the pull of increased opportunities due to growing demand for work. In sum, while we observe a downscaling loss for most online labor occupations in the United States, software and technology jobs appear to profit from a distancing bonus effect. The findings that we were able to gather via analyzing large-scale platform data coincide quite well with the insights from the interviews our colleagues had conducted at the same time. While this is only a preliminary finding, it suggests clear implications for workers and policymakers. For workers who are losing their jobs and freelancing gigs, this finding suggests that going online to find project work may unfortunately not be a viable way to claw back lost income across all occupations. For policymakers, it suggests that many self-employed people, including online workers, will probably need financial support to get through the crisis. To conclude in general on our recent findings, we see that for some occupations, namely jobs in tech, the lockdown had triggered both demand and supply for new projects. This could indicate that a global shock of an increase in remote work, for some occupations, might facilitate the trend of digitalization of work that had already gained momentum before the coronavirus crisis. I would like to thank Jesus College for giving my team and me the opportunity to present our work and thereby keeping the college community in touch digitally, while I am very much looking forward to returning to the college physically as well. I hope you enjoyed listening. Take care and stay safe.